You're tuned in to the Stingbat Radio Network on FM 101.2 KRPG.
Welcome to Dungeon Master Diaries, a podcast about Shadowdark and other role-playing games where two GMs talk about their recent experiences at the table and hopefully give you something useful that you can take to yours. On the show today, we discuss wizards and spellcasting. Hello there, sages and adventurers. My name is Jody, and with me, as always, is my good friend and GM colleague, Matt. How are you, sir?
Oh, today, what a spellbinding day it is today outside, isn't it?
Oh, it is lovely. It's just a magical day. All right, today's episode is going to focus on Shadowdark's spellcasting system with a lean toward the wizarding types. Now, Matt, you have done a deep dive into the tomes of arcane lore that are Shadowdark's spellbooks, so why don't you take us to the table?
Rain and Wind, also known as Raewyn, considers herself the most powerful sorceress in all of Dolmenwood. In fact, she always has, ever since she was a lowly level 1 wizard. As an elf who was kicked out of her Fey Court's wild hunt, she joined up with our eclectic group of travelers and adventurers, and she set about acquiring knowledge and power. Her exploits have become legendary, and they are many and varied, including polymorphing a noble into a dog and blowing up a town center while trying to outclass another wizard. Almost a year into her quest for arcane power, she now has access to some of the most powerful magic in the realm. From a lowly sorcerer to a powerful mage, she has walked the path and then some. However, her power is not infinite, and not every situation, it turns out, can be solved just by casting spells. Sometimes even that distinction is perhaps more important than the spells themselves.
All right, let us gather round the arcane fire of... Isn't that a band?
That's Arcade Fire.
Oh, close.
Arcade Fire.
Okay, well then
You're not a millennial. You wouldn't know.
You just made my day, dude. Thank you. So let's get into this and talk about, what does it mean to be a lowly level 1 mage with all of the bravado of this character? And what does it mean to be a high level mage, which is maybe something a lot of folks don't have? And then I think I want to begin this conversation with just the core Shadowdark spell casting mechanic. Because if we're talking wizards, we're talking casting spells.
Sure.
We sure as hell ain't talking about hit points. So,
yeah.
We just had our episode and our lovely chat with Mike Shea, and he offered his thoughts and some especially one-shot house rules maybe for Shadowdark spell casting. But we've had the luxury now of kind of having multiple ongoing campaigns. And you said in that interview that you're like, I don't know that I really agree with that nerfing of the punitive nature of the spellcasting mechanic.
The buffing of player characters and the nerfing of all of the fun of characters losing spells. Mwahaha, we're terrible people who love to see wizards without spells, apparently.
Yes, we'll talk about that. Is that all it is? We just like to punish our players because we're antagonistic GMs. That's this show.
Period. End of show. Turn off the mics. No, I feel very strongly about this, and it comes up all the time on the Shadowdark Reddit and the Shadowdark Discord page, and it's actually been coming up quite a bit more. And that is this just the core spell casting system. So, roll a d20, add your intelligence modifier for wizards, your wisdom modifier for priests, and then try and hit a target number that is 10 plus the spell's tier. And if you hit it, you cast a spell. If you don't hit it, the spell is lost. And you can keep casting until you lose the spell. So this is one of those systems that I was looking for when I was looking for a new D20 fantasy. You know this, Jody. I had this whole crazy Google Doc of trying to make rolling to cast work in 2014 D&D. And it was an abomination. I actually went back and looked at it and thought, maybe I'll post this to the... I'm not going to, because it's so obtuse and like esoteric and weird.
What a funny thing of 5e and 2014 D&D that if you pull the Vancian magic thread, the whole dang thing falls apart.
I mean, there's probably a way to do it, and you know, anyways, I don't want to go too far down that path, but I was looking, I was specifically, one of the things I was looking for in a new D20 fantasy or just fantasy RPG was a roll to cast system. And you know, DCC obviously is the other one, Dungeon Crawl Classics, that always comes up. And that is a very different system. This is a binary, right? You either cast the spell or you don't. So that produces inevitably concern among GMs that wizards and priests are going to lose all of their spells, and they will have nothing to do, and it will be sad to play those characters. And I don't think that is a legitimate concern. I think it's legitimate. I don't think I don't think it bears out during gameplay on a long timeline, is what I will say. Do you agree with that statement?
Yeah, it's a hypothetical that can happen. And I do want to be clear and charitable, but also in agreement with Mike Shea's take that if I were running a one-shot, I definitely, especially as a convention gamer, like, let me show you Shadowdark, I would be more inclined to do some little bit of nerfing, right, because I want you to see the system, not see that you rolled poorly 4 or 5 times. Yeah. So, but in a campaign style play, the chances of that happening are so slim and are not the end of the road. That's the part I get hung up on is, okay, so you're a wizard and you are level 1 and you failed to cast on all of your first attempts and you can't cast spells now. So I guess you're just walking along behind the party. And I think this does speak to something you and I do with Shadowdark. We leverage our players' classes and their backgrounds very heavily to allow for interaction with the world and to be as an onboarding to information and to situational bonuses that, hey, I know about this thing and I'm going to try and do this thing. I used to be a miner and we're in a cave, and would it be all right if I like knocked the supports loose? Does it happen that with my mining background, I know how to do that? Yeah, definitely. You'd have advantage on that check. Go for it. So just because your wizard has failed to cast spells, they are still a wizard and will understand arcane things inherently better than anybody else would. And they have some background knowledge and information that they came to their adventuring life with that which should also give them access. And to me is where Shadowdark really becomes an OSR game, in that, like, no, the answers aren't on the sheet in the sense of you can cast spells and you have super abilities, which wizards in Shadowdark do, certainly as we talk about them at higher level.
Sure.
But there are clues and things of how you as a player can be tested and creative and problem solving that don't just rely on you having your spells. And I feel like this is actually a really great system for teaching that kind of divergent thinking, if you will, or critical problem solving. But I'm getting away from our topic here.
That's exactly, I mean, this was the genesis of me wanting to talk about this. We have this wizard who is a level 9 wizard. I guess I didn't really say that in the intro, but I want to use this as an example of what happens if you carry that house rule forward, right? Because specifically Mike Shea's house rules, any of these house rules that make it easier or create some sort of guarantee that you are going to be able to cast a spell at least once. Either, you know, if you fail, it goes off, but you lose it, or whatever it is, whatever the house rule is. I've seen a handful of different ones. This idea that you don't lose the spell until it is successfully cast in some way. Carrying that forward, it undermines a couple of things, which is that one of the things, speaking of class, when we're talking about wizards inevitably have the largest set of things on their character sheet to do. Like they basically have a list of additional abilities that fighters don't. And this is another thing that comes up consistently in terms of conversations about Shadowdark is like, my fighter doesn't feel useful and my wizard has all these spells that they can use. To me, the balancing mechanic there And the thing that points to exactly what you were talking about is the fact that the wizard can lose their character abilities. And when they lose their character abilities, they have to start playing like a fighter might in combat, being creative, using the terrain, using their class niche and leveraging their class niche and their background, which sometimes dovetail and actually almost always intersect and dovetail in a very interesting way. They have to start thinking outside the context of their character sheet. And to me, that is Shadowdark. That is OSR. It's not like when a wizard without spells isn't suddenly not playing the game. They are and have been playing the game just in a new and different way. And in fact, just a kind of final point about this, when you're talking about high-level casters, what happens is those casters inevitably are faced with a different problem, which we can probably get to later, which is I have almost too many options, or I have options, but those options in this particular setting don't work. See, Fireball, right? And you can't cast Fireball if all your melee fighters. I guess you can, but
right.
But there's always limiting factors to every spell in Shadowdark, level restrictions, etc. But there's and one of those restrictions is if you fail it, you lose it. And I think the punitive nature of that is actually important and should be sort of core to the class. So I'll stop there.
I'm going to play devil's advocate on that idea a little bit.
Okay.
So
all right.
Not only do you fail it and you lose it, and I can hear the internet going, yeah, and the fighter can keep swinging his sword. So, and I think you addressed that well of but you have options. You can still swing a sword as a wizard or a dagger or a staff or whatever it may be.
Right.
You can still do that.
Yeah, you can still swing a staff. It just poorly.
Yeah, but you are and depending on what you rolled in your stats, you might be pretty decent at it actually. Sure. So, other than that pesky D4 hit points, there's not a limiting factor that says you couldn't still do those things. So that comparison, I agree with you but I've lost my spell and the wizard or the fighter can still swing their sword with all their bonuses. I'm like, yeah, there's a lot of nuance there that doesn't get discussed, which is, a thing we hang our hat on. But what about 5% of the time, dun, 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 if I'm a wizard, and we're talking wizards is what we're talking about, I might have to roll on that mishap table, doggone it, and my character's going to die.
They might, and that sucks. That is the cost of playing with the arcane. This is another one of the balancing mechanics, man. And I think people see wizard mishaps. I wonder how many people have actually first experienced them. We'll get to that in a second, I'm sure, in terms of avoiding mishaps and avoiding fumbles. I wonder how many folks have experienced a sizable chunk of these tables or have read them in full, because a lot of them are bad. The vast majority, if not almost every single one, does not kill your character.
Right. It's the dice gate to get to you explode and everybody dies is very unlikely.
On the wizard tier 1 to 2 spell mishap table, the only way to take damage is technically the 2 result explosion. You take 1d8 damage. Now it might, if you cast magic missile or something like that and somehow you rolled 2 1s or whatever, refraction means you target yourself with the spell and then perhaps you take some damage. What I like about the spell mishaps in Shadowdark, and the reason that it is lamentable, that's, I think, broadly speaking, from the interactions and conversations that I have been a part of on the Discord and I've seen in other places, it feels like people don't experience them very much. It's sad because they add an additional layer of uncertainty that I think continues to bring wizards back down to the level they need to be. There is a broadly known problem in D&D, D20 fantasy games, which is that wizards on a long enough timeline outpace fighters always. 100% of the time. They can cast Wish is always the example, right? that is still a problem, frankly, in Shadowdark, but it is made somewhat better by, at low levels, wizards being functionally less effective and more challenging to play, because they do lose their spells at a reasonably high rate when they are low level, especially if you don't get an absolutely bonkers score in your intelligence modifier, in your intelligence stat. But by late levels, they are often extraordinarily powerful, and we can get to that when we talk about our level 9 wizard, who is just bananas.
So yeah, it's been really fun playing a lower level character next to this high level wizard. That's been a really fun experience because of how the interaction works in game. We'll talk more about that in a minute, but I want to stick with mishaps just for a moment longer. Sure. It was interesting that I was chatting with the player of Raywin, and she was saying that she genuinely, unless it is a moment critical, does not want luck tokens spent on mishaps tables because she wants to see what will happen. She wants to roll the D12 and see what comes up. And I would say for all of those GMs out there, and I think this is probably not the camp that has any complaints, but if you are a GM who says Shadowdark is a game about rolling on random tables, that to you is a core value of what Shadowdark is, I'm pretty clearly on the record in this show of going, I don't know that I actually agree with that fully, but
we can unpack that later.
Yeah, that's not this show, but there are GMs who definitely have had a ton of success and joy at their table going, Shadowdark is about random occurrences and random tables man, is the mishap table the arc, the peak of the hill upon which you should die if you are holding that to be true, meaning this is the coolest random thing, because some of the random stuff that happens, like creating a giant sinkhole in the middle of town, you kind of alluded that. Yeah. When you were having just an NPC narrative little fun scene of with a questionable wizard who maybe just was a really good card shark thief. And was a very mediocre wizard versus like a level 7 wizard at that time.
He had no real magical powers. He was literally doing actual magic. He was not a wizard. I mean, this is the crazy part that I've never told the table, is that he had no magical powers. He was just a magician, which in Dolmenwood is actually the class that is akin to wizards. But regardless, this dude was basically just a real magician, and she was like, I'm going to outclass this guy and cast a fireball, and then she rolled a 1, and then we had a 30-foot sinkhole in the ground at the center of the...
During a festival.
Yeah. Luckily, she cast it up, so the 30-foot sinkhole, I ruled that it didn't quite, destroy all... It just, destroyed a lot of stuff. But anyways, that's getting far afield. Getting back to your point.
But the point was that scene never would have happened if the mishap table were avoided.
Right.
If the mishap table were disallowed because you couldn't fail your spell once.
Sure.
There wasn't a scene where there was anything at stake. And credit to player, we had nothing at stake. We were just having what we call our crossroads / shopping episodes, depending on your table's preference. But it was a narrative scene of things were going to kind of unfold and talk to some NPCs.
It was basically just downtime.
Yeah, effectively. And she got into this interaction, and then that kicked off our next story, and off we went. But again, none of that would have happened without the failure mechanics around spellcasting. And it ended up being this wonderful, wonderful moment. Now, we can't talk about mishaps and failed spellcasting without talking about luck, because luck is a mechanic in the game, and there's lots of ways to play it. I think it is important to note here that rules as written in the rule book, are luck tokens a shareable commodity, is not ironclad.
I mean,
yes. And Kelsey at her table treats them as a shared commodity. I also rule that way because we've played that way thus far. Sure.
Future
me may change my mind. But luck tokens, right? They are the next kind of if we're talking spellcasters, we're talking power levels, we're talking how big of a penalty is it to lose your spells? What if you mishap? So the 5% chance I mishap can be undone if there is a luck token at the table.
Right.
Bloop.
So Jody, I just want to quote this. You can also give your luck token to a companion is written on page 79, which I realize you like, how do you give it to them? Can they use it immediately? But also the Roustabout has a feature where they augment. Anyways, long story short, I see your point, but I think rules is written, you can share luck tokens, and I know what you're getting at here. Luck tokens for me represent both one of the great joys of running Shadowdark. I love luck tokens, and then in some instances I find them utterly frustrating. So in our Dolmenwood game, our long-running, long-form Dolmenwood campaign, I started by giving everyone a luck token. I wouldn't do that again, but I do think it's fun, and I don't mind that I continue to do it because of the inertia of the campaign, and I don't want to change things mid-campaign that I think would have a disruptive effect like that. That would undermine a lot of the stuff that has happened, and it would fundamentally change the game. However, the thing that you and I have implemented is that luck cannot be spent to re-roll a 1. You can only use it to negate a fumble, which allows you to spend luck to negate a mishap. Additionally, you and I have gone back and forth about this, but in terms of luck tokens, can you re-roll a re-rolled die? And I continue to allow as many re-rolls as the party would like. And I think you do as well. However, interestingly enough, the party has, and myself included as a player, we have started moving away from throwing a lot of luck tokens at a single roll. I think organically, we've all internalized that, first of all, I don't know that that's the most fun thing to do, but also I don't know that it's tactically and strategically the best thing to do. So talk to me about, though, luck tokens allow you to re-roll your dice, so you might be able to avoid losing a spell. As written, you can avoid a mishap. You can re-roll out of a mishap. And the big complaint I hear about luck tokens is that they make spellcasting too consistent at higher levels, and they allow players to avoid mishaps at all levels. And how do you feel about that? Because you are not playing a spellcaster right now. You're playing a thief, and spells and luck tokens have an interesting economic relationship, I guess.
Yeah,
we use coins to signify them, so I guess that's where I was going with that.
Yeah, well, and in the coin feels apt here, truly. I don't have an answer, and I am in my campaign that I'm, GMing. I am trying different things right now with how to use luck tokens, trying to get a little closer to the spirit, I'll say, of what's in the core rulebook. I don't think I'm really there yet. I don't have a good answer for this. I don't notice it or have any issue with it when I am playing in our Dolmenwood table group, where everybody just begins each session with a luck token and off we go. And I think if you are going to use that rule of everybody just starts with a luck token, I think the notion of you can turn off a natural one for penalty, but you can't turn it into a success. It just stops there. It's just a failure. I think that's a good rule that I give our play tested stamp of approval of, hey, if you want to
heavily
use that,
play tested.
Yeah, if you want to use that, go for
months
it.
now. Yeah.
Now, that said, when we were doing our Sunday open table games of rotating dungeon delves, and you go in, get the loot, get out, go home, level up, rinse, repeat, which is a lot of fun and is, to me, the most classic style of play, I did start really having a problem as a GM with that luck tokens not only were being exclusively reserved for spellcasting, but they were really exclusively being reserved for priests. Spellcasting. Like the wizards, unless the wizard miscast on a relatively high level or high damage spell, the only player class that was getting anywhere near those luck tokens was a priest. And that over time began really, really grating on me.
Same here, man.
It became antithetical to the narrative. It became gamey in a way that I didn't enjoy, and has definitely caused me as a GM to kind of, in my own campaign, I think overcorrect for it. And I'm now trying to find a path back to a comfortable middle ground, which is, the notion of GMing and if you're doing any,
I love this idea
stuff.
of the nation of GMing. This is we're all members of the this
homebrew nation. Hey man,
sorry I interrupted you.
No, the NFL season kicked off. I got nations on the brain. My fan affliction shows itself. So the relationship between luck tokens and spellcasting is one that, to just be candid about it, I don't like. I like luck tokens very much as a mechanic in Shadowdark. I really find a problem with that the use it or lose it, but I can undo the use it or lose it as long as we have a luck token. Becomes just a given. And anything that has to do with channeling the divine or the arcane, if we go include priests along with this wizard discussion, sure. Anything that allows me to go, and that's a safe thing to do, to go tap, tap, tap on the rules of the universe, and I can extract fire from nothingness. I am of the mind that there should be some risk to that. And you as a lowly mortal go tap, tap, tap. Hey, God, do my bidding for a moment. There should be some risk to that. Now, admittedly, priests don't have even the chance of spontaneous combustion, but they do have the chance of long-term loss of a spell, depending on how you want to rule that as a GM. Because again, that's a Shadowdark. There's some things you as a GM need to figure out how you want to do there. But yeah, that intersection, I think, is really an important one. And I think it's important because it gets to this discussion around, as a GM, if you are running a campaign, what do you want the power level of your Shadowdark game to be? And Shadowdark as a rule system can range from really blood and guts in the mud gritty to relatively heroic. We run, I think both of us, leaning towards the heroic end of that spectrum.
Sure.
And luck tokens have a ton to do with that. And how magic plays in your game is going to be affected by the use of luck tokens. And all of these kind of like layers in this sandwich have to be something you as a GM at least are aware of. If not, you don't need to have answers. I mean, we've played, I don't know how many hours of Shadowdark at this point, and am anxious for the next batch. And don't feel like I have a really firm grip on this, but I do have enough experience to go, man, if you want blood and guts in the mud, you have to leave these restrictors in place. And if you want heroic, you need to open up these floodgates. These will cause those things to happen way more than any other kind of questionable GM fiat things.
So I don't want to make this a luck token episode, but this is literally probably one of the most important interactions mechanically, because I think for GMs, let me say it like this. For GMs who are worried that low-level wizards will fail their spells and have nothing to do, luck tokens are a solution to that. However, like most of the solutions I've seen, they are a pretty blunt force solution. My preferred solution is for players to understand what they're signing up for and they become a wizard, which is not unimaginable, pure 100% effective, consistent power from level 1. Instead, it's fickle and dangerous. However, here is what I would do if you're worried about this. I think that there's a simple fix. And there's a couple things you can do, which is, you can say that you can't share luck tokens. That's a reasonable house rule. And it does create a situation where players are more and literally required to use them on their own rolls, but are more apt to use them for things that are of interest to them rather than feeling the pressures of the party to save their luck token for cure wounds or, for a fireball, right? Like if we're talking about higher level spells or higher tier spells. But the other thing, and this is to kind of get us away from talking about luck tokens, is, when we're talking about wizards specifically, I just want to reiterate that it might sound punitive to not be able to use a luck token to re-roll a 1, but I really just want to ask folks, like, think about that long and hard. And think about it long and hard. You could just apply it to spellcasting rolls, right? Sure. But I love it for all natural ones, the ability to spend a luck token to cancel the fumble or the mishap, but not to re-roll the die. And that alone, I feel like you and I have both seen. It's not perfect, but it is something that for spellcasting in particular has made it has made more mishaps happen. It has made more interesting decision making, and it makes wizards and priests have to think a little harder about asking the table for a luck token when they're already going to fail, right? And it makes it puts, instead of wizards and priests being where these luck tokens usually go and it being almost automatic, it creates a little bit less certainty. I don't know. Does that make sense?
It does to me. I think one of the side effects we've seen now, admittedly, our Dolmenwood player group is deeply story and shenanigans first. This play group wants to, in various ways, for all 6 players, we all like to push the big red button or to push the story ourself. Matt is often just, cobbling together as we are just running amok in the world that is Dolmenwood.
Yeah.
And
I couldn't railroad you guys if I wanted to.
I think we unconsciously resist it.
Anyways, I'm just,
But I've noticed we share luck tokens a lot more than we used to. It's and this might be a table culture discussion. It just happened for us. I've noticed people don't ask for luck tokens ever.
No.
At that table. It's people go, do you want my luck token?
Yeah.
It's never, if it's yours, because we each get one to start. If it's yours, most of us are pretty quick to cash them in or not on frivolous things.
The first roll of the game, a luck token was spent our last session.
Yeah. on not a wizard mishap or anything. It was just, and I think that's a good thing that our table group does treat them as a shared commodity, but they aren't the get out of jail free, because Matt, you've built enough credit with us that we know that just because we failed at doing something, it doesn't mean, you're going to die now. It's that, in fact, there may be
you guys
more
into a false sense of security.
That there's truly that there is fun story on the other side of failure at times.
It's the long con, Jody. So next session, I'm going to... You guys don't even know what's coming.
Here's a dragon. You're all dead. Roll new ones. Can't wait. That'll be so much fun. You've teased it a few times this episode, so I don't want to get too far afield without talking about this thing. You've talked about the difference between a low-level wizard, and I think the discussion around you're going to lose all your spells and you're going to be sad and you won't have anything to do, which neither you or I, even if you rolled you rolled 3 ones in a row as a level 1 wizard, or 4 ones in a row. Even then, I'm like, man, that sucks, but I think that would be interesting. At higher levels, that is just not going to happen. You have too many spells for that to statistically, somebody out there is going to go, actually, okay, fine, it happened at your table. Great. But that's so unlikely. That's why it's interesting.
Right. So,
but not a lot of people have played with level 9 wizards running around.
No, and we've had a high level wizard for a long time, and a couple of things I think are important to note here. First of all, that if you have a wizard in your game, I think it's sort of incumbent upon you as a GM to at least make sure that there are scrolls out there that the wizard can seek. Don't make them easy to get. I firmly disagree with the notion that you should be able to purchase scrolls from like a vendor. I think treasure and magic in general should be hard to get and should be rare and coveted, etc. But I think that there should be scrolls in your world for wizards to find so that they can build up their catalog of spells. And per the rules, if a wizard of level 1 finds a tier 3 scroll and is able to learn it, then they can cast it per the rules because they know it. And that's a really interesting and core sort of conceit of wizards, is this idea of being learned and accumulating spells. And so when you get to high levels, you have these wizards that have a fairly sizable amount of spells. And I want to call out a few spells and kind of get them on the table as the ones that I think are emblematic of the power level. And I want to go 1 tier 3, 1 tier 4, and 1 tier 5 to kind of just give a sense of like what we're talking about here. I'm going to try and choose spells that aren't the classic fireball or dimension door, right? You can blow stuff up, you can teleport, you can wish. Like we know those spells, right? And players are going to know what they mean before they even read the spell's description. But I want to point out some spells that I think maybe some people either haven't seen and that you actually might want to be aware of. And the first one is Magic Circle, which is a tier 3 wizard spell. It is the duration is focus, and you essentially create a near-sized cube that is centered on yourself. And for the duration, creatures of a type, for the example in the spell description is demons, can't attack or cast hostile spells on anyone inside the circle. And those chosen creatures can't possess, compel, or beguile anyone inside the circle. This spell has foisted me so many times, and it is also important as a GM to know that this spell exists, because you need to know how you're going to rule how specific or broad this description of a type can be. The second spell I want to point out is Divination, which is a tier 4 wizard spell. It is an instant duration. You cast it on yourself, and it is basically casting the bones. It is basically a pumped up augury. You can ask the GM a question, and they must answer truthfully, yes or no. And there's a penalty if you cast it more than once in 24 hours. But like this spell requires, as a GM, that you have an answer to the question. So, like, when wizards get up there in power level, they might just be able to like pop a world-defining question. And if you're homebrewing your world like you are, Jody, some annoying wizard goes, Jody, how does does this thing work like this? And suddenly you are required in this moment, boom, instantaneously to have a yes or no answer to my question that I made up because I'm an annoying player who wants to know more about your world. And you're like, dude, I haven't even thought about this. Finally, the tier 5 spell I want to point out is Hold Monster. Its duration is focus. You paralyze a creature. If the target is level 9 or higher, it can make a strength save versus your last spellcasting check at the start of its turn to end the spell. The reason that this is so terrifying is because this is one of those spells that can end a single solo monster encounter. And if you're trying to run those kind of classic one against many encounters as a GM, because you have a boss battle or whatever, and you're going to end your campaign, it's going to be epic, and your lich is going to... Nope.
Yep.
Your lich is going to get hold monstered and going to be paralyzed and is going to sit there like an idiot. And of course, maybe the lich, has other ways of avoiding this or whatever. But like, you need to know that these spells exist, and they are not the classic sort of spells. I think Hold Monster is a classic spell. But anyways, I wanted to point those 3 out as emblematic of what happens when wizards get to higher levels. Now, Jody, I want you to imagine with me that we have implemented this house rule, and you cannot fail Hold Monster until you successfully cast it. I don't think that's good. like
now, as a GM, I have to build a way to counter that.
Yes, and I know that most games don't make it to the point where player characters are going to get to high enough levels for a wizard to get a tier 5 spell. However, when you implement house rules, there is an expectation at the table that they will persist. Obviously, we are both in favor of trying things if they don't work out. But I think the problem is that you won't know that house rule isn't going to work out for a long enough timeline that you'll build up inertia. And once that inertia is there, taking it away is going to feel awful to players. So I just talked for a while, but I wanted to point those things out. I think they're really important. And this is kind of where I'm at as far as like, man, playing with a high-level character, a high-level wizard, is like, I don't even really know what I'm planning for, and I don't know what I'm walking into as a GM.
And I think those folks who I do occasionally bristle at, who take the stance of, and that's why you should only play Shadowdark rules as written for a really, really long time until you make any changes, which, neither Matt nor I agree with. I think there is also the caution of, if you are going to make changes, just be aware you may be signing up for those changes long term, or you need to be really clear with your players about, like, away from table, this thing may change if we see it's a problem, so that it's not we've played 20 games and now your spells can fail when they couldn't before. And that's just good GMing and running and managing of humans that comes with this. The other piece in this that you bring to mind that I think is worth discussing, that we have learned, is the other side, because you said you were trying to take non-marquee spells of the tiers.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So we look at tier 1, most wizards are going to show up with sleep. They'll probably show up with magic missile, or if they're real daring, maybe burning hands. And then, probably light or charm person, or, there's a couple.
Or light.
Right. I said that first.
No, I know that.
Or light.
Or light.
Right.
I mean, like, I think if you know Shadowdark, you know how powerful that damn spell is.
It's a good one. Now, that said, what you and I have learned is that's not when wizards kick butt. In fact, what we have found with most of our players who have gotten to higher level play with wizards, they very quickly, I would say by like level 3, they start going, dang it, I kind of wish I had hold portal.
Yep.
Man, Featherfall would have been more useful. Floating disc.
Dude, floating disc rules.
Really wish I could, because what happens is, if your table, like Matt and I's, has some elements of yes and. Mm-hmm. At our last session, one of our witch players wanted to use Willowman, and the way we've described it at the table is that you, as a witch, you summon the Willowman and it brings these nightmare dream visions. And she said, well, if they're dreams, could I ask the Willowman not to terrify the person? I ruled no, that the Willowman is inherently just the embodiment of fear and all that is terrifying and horrible, and that was a really over asking of the spell.
You terrible GM. You can't tell your players no.
But that question says, Matt, I'm not a horrible GM.
I would have made the same ruling. I would have. No. No.
But the fact that she asked says she knows it's okay to ask.
Yes.
So things like hold portal and how much do I need to hold? Is it just a magical barrier, which is not how I rule it? There has to be something to hold there. Is a hat enough? Turns out the answer is yes in my world. So it was
a very big hat.
It was a very big hat. These utility spells, though, are really make wizards feel like wizards. And I think they get overlooked in favor of Magic Missile. And the reason Magic Missile, as reliable as it is, it's D4 damage. And by the time you're level 3, 4, and 5, trucking out D4 damage a turn isn't super helpful. It's nice and reliable, and there's an upside to it, but you're constantly, as the wizard, going, damn, I wish I could do something else. Damn, wish I could do something else. You could throw a dagger at it and not have any risk. You could hit it with your staff. There are actually things you could do that wouldn't have a risk at all. And if you had hold portal, it might actually save the day, where a magic missile did nothing. And these auto take spells end up being a weird wizard tax that we have found our veteran players, I think, and maybe you disagree, our veteran players, as they get higher level characters, as both priests, because priests have to deal with this too, and as wizards, go, is there a way to swap spells? Is there a way I can like learn and like unlearn a spell to learn something else off? And no, go find a scroll. Okay, can I get somebody to teach? And it becomes this interesting loop. I just think, not to go back to the luck thing, but these like have to have fireball and lightning bolt are very, very good. They are intentionally very, very good. When Kelsey was on with us, she talked about like, no, there's a legacy of those spells being the break point where wizards go from like, oh, pretty good, that's interesting, to like, oh my God, oh, this guy bends reality and we should all be afraid. Quick, up with the gird thine loins and run. You know, and it's just this auto take thing that again is kind of unsavory and is kind of an argument for I need spells to fail too. Because if there's auto take spells, then I kind of need them not to be also auto successful.
I'm glad you took it in this direction, because I think there's two things I want to say. The first is that I super agree with you. And I know that this is true, by the way, that higher level wizards wish they would have started with different spells, because I rewrote and for our Dolmenwood game, very late in our game, probably over the summer, actually, so probably within the last few months, I took every spell in the Dolmenwood player book and wrote it as a Shadowdark spell, and then gave my wizards and priest an opportunity to completely reselect their spells, because Dolmenwood has very different spells, but they still have some crossover. And I noticed something very interesting, which was, especially with one of our wizards, who I believe is now level 6 or level 7, he is basically just a utility wizard. And I think this is one of the things that people don't realize about Shadowdark is you look at the wizards and I see people complaining about, is there a way for wizards to make their magic missile better? And my thought in my head is, you are thinking about wizards in Shadowdark wrong. They are more akin, in my opinion, to 4th edition Dungeons and Dragons wizards, which were essentially utility characters that would manipulate the battlefield. They do very different things, but I think that if you think about them through that lens, they are not damage-dealing characters. There is a character class for that. It is called the Fighter. If you want to do damage, go swing a sword and hit stuff really hard. If you want to do damage, sure, you can cast Fireball, you can cast Lightning Bolt, but those things should, in my opinion, have a limitation. I really dislike the ability for wizards and priests, but mostly wizards, to strategically and tactically move their spell locations to a specific point, because that is not the point of the class. The point of the class is to be a more utility-based class. And I think if you want an example of this, it is very likely that by the time you get to level 5 or level 7 as a wizard, you will have advantage on at least one spell you know. I would rule, so the 8 to 9 wizard talent is gain advantage on casting one spell you know. I would rule that also, and I think you've done the same, that also affects focus checks, because it is just a spellcasting roll. You're casting the spell again. You're casting it to keep focus. So if you're talking about Detect Magic, which is a focus spell that you need to continue focusing on for multiple rounds in order to know the general properties of a particular magic item or a magic thing in the world, boy howdy, would it be nice to have advantage on Detect Magic. And actually, Jody, at the time of recording, myself and another one of the players in both of our games, we carpooled yesterday. And after the session that we concluded at your house, we're driving home and we're talking about, we were actually talking about fighters and wizards. And I love playing fighters. This particular player prefers playing wizards and likes having all these these things that he can do. He literally said, my favorite spell in Shadowdark is Detect Magic. Mm-hmm. Playing a level 7 wizard, Detect Magic favorite spell, because you get to know stuff about the world. The same is true of augury, and the same is true of divination, magic in general, of that kind of type. And I just think that's the power of wizards, is knowing things, information, knowledge. Learning new spells is in that bubble. Acquiring information should be the entire thrust of this class. And spells usually allow you to manipulate the world so that you have some amount of knowledge of how it's going to work. You can detect magic. You can potentially detect thoughts to gain information. You could, command somebody to do something, and now they're going to. It is about knowledge, Jody, not damage. This is how I interpret the whole class. And having seen a high level caster and having seen them completely redo their entire spell list with brand new spells that I wrote that are Dolmenwood spells, they took mostly utility spells. Anyways, that's my thought.
There's a byproduct of that in that Raywin, the character we've kind of couched this conversation initially around, who is a level 9 wizard, that player with the moniker the most powerful sorceress in the world from level 1, which is a bold statement when you got 4 hit points or whatever it was.
Yeah.
They have exclusively said, I want power. So it is about damage dealing and pushing damage threshold and, killing things and blowing things up, and
advantage on lightning bolt.
That kind of wizard, including her own party members with lightning bolt, much to her chagrin. And a byproduct of that is that as this other player who is playing Usador, our Mossling wizard, and his re-rack of wait, I want to just build for utility, and then watching how much more that player is enjoying their individual self-contained experience in playing that wizard than they were initially when it was kind of a mixed bag of damage and know things and mess with the world. And this does get to the heart of the question of your campaign. And does the campaign you're running, is it just about get in and do combat and kill things? Which, much like I commented earlier about Shadowdark's a game about rolling on random tables, there are those who say, well, Shadowdark's a game about not going in and just killing things.
Mm-hmm.
Well, if that's true, then wouldn't it be better to have utility control spells to avoid end combats than it is to have the blow up the room spell, if the whole goal is to just get around the combats? And the wizards are exceptional at that. As a GM, the counter argument is obviously, so make sure you're doing both so that there isn't one size fits all. Because if the wizard can always solve the problem, that is a problem. You touched on something. This is a little bit tangential. And before we kind of take a break and go to our sponsors and do some big thinking in the interim to try and figure out what we want to take away from these arcane ramblings, you mentioned about templates. And this is a hill that or area of effect spells like Fireball. This is increasingly a thing that I think both of us are becoming sensitive to and are going
bothered by.
So I have the ability to cast Fireball, and it does a near-sized area.
Sure.
Right? So what does that mean? Per every other metric we use, that's a 30-foot sphere.
Sure.
Right? That's near is roughly 30 feet. If you're on a grid, that's what that is. Okay. So I'm going to place it right here so it can only hit these guys in combat and not the people they're fighting with. I'm going to place it in the corner of the room so that when it explodes, it only explodes 15 feet into the room, and the other 15 feet are wasted into the wall. Increasingly, that is something you and I are like, nope. You cast it and it makes that big of an effect in the space or something to that effect. We don't have an answer here, but in this paradigm of the argument that wizards are underpowered because they can lose their spells, you and I, on this long trajectory of play and watching wizards develop and watching characters get experience with wizards and seeing what they look like at higher levels and more kind of divergent playing in the gray of Shadowdark, have found that no, actually that is tactically efficient in a way that Shadowdark really isn't. And it also starts lopsiding the pros and cons that, okay, you want to lob a fireball, it's going to explode. It hits a target and can't I target the wall? Yeah. And then it's going to send all that force into the room. Oh, well, why doesn't it that is a UGM
It's a ball of fire.
Right. And an explosive one at that. And the lightning bolt is a line. It makes a line. You can't wrap the line partially around one thing to hit another. And electricity, most people don't know this, but follows a current and is very apt to actually jump from one thing to the next. So
for sure.
If two people are standing next to each other in metal and one of them gets zapped, the one next to them should at least have a chance of getting zapped. That's how electricity works. All of this may be noodly in a way that your game doesn't do, but I think to kind of wrap this up, the degree of Matt and I's experience with wizards and spellcasting and all of these things not only is counter to we should make sure wizards can't fail to cast their spells right away because then that's no fun. We are so far away from that camp. We're more in the like, hey, be really careful about how freaking powerful wizards are. They're the class that gets to break the rules of the game. They're the class that gets to have a laundry list of solutions on their character sheet in a game that isn't supposed to be about that. They literally have a list of things that go, I have a way to fix that problem. Clunk, I rolled a die, and there's a luck token at the table. So clunk, I rolled again. Hey, look, I did it because I probably have a bonus on that roll, and it's at worst a 50-50. So I just want to kind of end with that of before you start powering up your spellcasters, maybe take a moment to go, what is this going to look like when they're able to lob fireballs with impunity? And from that, we'll take a break and hear from a sponsor.
Have you ever wanted to master the arcane arts? I mean, after listening to this episode, who wouldn't want to? You can be all powerful. You can weave spells, command the elements, or unlock the deepest secrets of the magical world. Introducing Mastercast. You knew it. This sponsor, they're back. They are where the greatest wizards and spellcasters teach you lowly peasant, the craft of magic. And Mastercast, they have the best of the best. Whether it's the intricate art of potion brewing or transformational magic, they have experts who have mastered turning raw arcane power into whatever you desire. Jody, you have been using Mastercast actually for quite some time now, and I know that at the beginning, the power was almost too much for you to handle. But I think from what I've heard, you've been really getting the hang of this.
Man, you're not kidding. And now with Mastercast's satisfaction spell back guarantee, I've never been happier. Last time we did this and we had them as a sponsor, I talked about my failing to read the fine print on Charm Person, and that my wife realized after the fact that, well, I had to get back in her good graces. And I went to Mastercast and I said, is there a way I could swap out that spell that actually has some arcane balance? And they said, that's a great idea. Not only are we offering that to you, Jody, but to every listener. And now I know Burning Hands. Dude, you should see the souffles I can knock out these days. It's amazing.
Perfect, Jody. You are this is exactly what we're talking about. You can go from total idiot to guy who knows magic in no time at all. And it's not just about learning spells, it's about understanding the magic behind them. Of course, you'll gain the skills and confidence necessary to cast with precision, focus, and flair. No mishaps for you. At Mastercast, you'll be guided step by step with exclusive insights that only the world's top wizards can offer. So whether you're a novice wizard or you've already mastered a few spells, Mastercast can help you take your magic to the next level. Unlock your potential today. Mastercast, where you learn from the masters and become the master.
All right, allow us to bring this topic into the light. Matt, what's your core takeaway from this fiery discussion?
All right, real quick, just to reiterate, be careful of buffing early casters. It is tempting to do, and your players might want you to do it. They might be frustrated, but resist, and make sure that you prime players for those early levels and tell them what the purpose, the class niche of the wizard is, that it's knowledge. Make sure that they know that they have more things to do than just cast spells.
I'm going to disagree with you entirely. Buff your wizards early. Make them better. But do it by the rules. just give them scrolls.
That's nice. All right, I have 3 more spells to watch for that I think you might want to kind of dog-ear those pages or circle. Write in your books, people. Come on, let's do it. Resilient Sphere, Pass Wall, and Summon Extraplanar. Give those a read, and I think you will find that they are things that you are glad you know exist. Pass Wall is a classic spell, but I decided to include it because it is so unbelievably disruptive. And Summon Extraplanar is a classic spell that summons something. I hate summon spells,
but players love it.
I know. So
you know what? It wouldn't be a wizard episode if we didn't go big brain esoteric here at the end. So, as the GM, the crafter of the world, have your lore dump ready. How does magic work in your world? What are the arcane boundaries? What influences interplay between the religious and the magical, and perhaps the demonic? I don't know. Give it a thought and let your players find out through play. All right, friends, as our arcane light grows dim, see what I did there? We hope you're able to find something useful in this episode that you can take to a future game. If you have any questions or unique experiences from your table that you'd like us to discuss on a future episode, you can email us at dmdiariespod@gmail.com. You can also reach out via YouTube or Facebook, or best of all, get at us on the Dungeon Master Diaries thread on the Shadowdark Discord channel. It's been popping lately. It's been great. You can find links to those feeds and any other materials we referenced in this episode's show notes. Until next time, keep it magical.
Dungeon Master Diaries is a production of the Stingbat Radio Network. It is produced by Jody Kropholler and edited by Matt Bruner. Our intro and outro music is composed by Christian Schuster. Dungeon Master Diaries is an independent production, is not affiliated with the Arcane Library, LLC. Shadowdark RPG is a product of the Arcane Library. Copyright 2023. Passed our focus check.